I was a new student at Southern Lehigh High School in Pennsylvania, and everything felt so unfamiliar. As the 11th grade school year began, I felt completely isolated, as friend groups had already been established for a long time. As I sat down, I realized they were twins strangely identical. We exchanged phone numbers, and I thought things were turning out well. They invited me to hang out after school, my first chance to make friends, and I eagerly agreed. I asked them, "Can I sit here?" And they exchanged a quick glance before nodding. They introduced themselves as Antonio, and Bruno seemed quite friendly, and we started chatting casually. Finally, I spotted a table in a secluded corner with only two people who didn't look too intimidating. I walked into the crowded cafeteria with my food tray, my eyes scanning for an empty seat, my heart pounding with anxiety. The most terrifying part was lunchtime, where the school required 11th graders to go to the cafeteria, and I knew I would be sitting alone like an outcast. As soon as I got home, I received a text message from Bruno confirming the meeting plan. The location and time were strange: 9 p.m. at the nearby cemetery. He said it was a cool place to hang out because tomorrow was Saturday. I replied, "Yeah," and started walking in the dark, heading towards the cemetery. The cold air, the rustling leaves underfoot, and the smell of damp earth made me even more uneasy. I hesitated, considering the strangeness of meeting at a cemetery at night, but because I wanted friends so badly and had nothing else to do, I decided to go. When I reached the road beside the cemetery, I texted Bruno, "I'm here. Where are you guys?" I pushed branches aside, stepped through unfamiliar bushes, my heart pounding with fear. He replied immediately, "We're in the woods near a small lake, want to show you." As I walked, I thought about moving, being a new student, and this crazy situation, going to a cemetery at night to meet two strangers. Close to 9 p.m. Bruno texted to confirm, "Are you still coming? Meet at the road next to the cemetery." He sent the location, and I decided to go into the dark woods using only the weak flashlight on my phone to light the way. Suddenly, I heard slow, very low footsteps from a distance. The slow, deliberate footsteps gave me goosebumps. I stopped, listened, confirming they were real footsteps, not my imagination. Feeling like I was getting close, I called out loudly, "Bruno, Antonio, where are you guys?" I called out again, "Don't try to scare me," but there was no reply. The terrifying silence made me think, this is stupid, I should go back. Before I could react, I felt fingernails scratch my neck, pulling me backward. Fear surged, and I struggled to break free from the grip. I turned around, started walking back towards the road, but the footsteps suddenly became fast and hurried. I heard a familiar shout. "Get him! Get him!" The voice of one of the two. I knew they chased me to the edge of the woods, but I was faster and managed to get away. I ran as fast as I could towards the road leaves, whipping my face, my heart pounding like it would burst. As soon as I got inside, I immediately told my parents about the attack, tears streaming down my face. And I still wonder if I hadn't escaped, what would have happened. Finally, I ran straight home without stopping, my breath coming in gasps, my body trembling. The betrayal from people I thought were friends makes me afraid to trust anyone anymore. Now the fear still haunts me. Why did they do that? What were their intentions? I thought about taking pictures of the scratches on my neck as evidence because the attacker's fingernails left clear marks. I agreed without objection because the fear still haunted me. After the attack in the woods, I thought about calling the police, but ultimately decided not to do it right away, fearing things would get more complicated. The next morning, I went to school and reported the incident to the administration, providing the text messages from Bruno as evidence. I constantly felt uneasy, as if someone was watching me, making sleep restless. As a result, Antonio and Bruno were immediately expelled, and my parents asked me to block both of their phone numbers. My parents were worried they might know our home address, but I reassured them, no, they don't know as far as I know. In the following days, the fear clung to me. I lived in anxiety that they might seek revenge at any moment. Filled with suspicion, I wondered who could have opened it. It certainly wasn't my parents, as it was this cold. I heard the wind whistling into the room, and when I looked over, the window was completely wide open, the curtains flapping wildly. About a week after they were expelled, late one night I woke up because the room was unusually cold, even though the outside temperature was only about 50 degrees Fahrenheit. I closed the window, locked it securely, then went to my parents' room and knocked gently. She tried to wake my dad, but he just mumbled, "You're old enough, go back to sleep, don't be childish." I walked to the window, looked down at the sill outside, which served as a fire escape, and a chilling sensation spread across my skin. A feeling of horror surged. I thought, is someone in there? Even though I didn't want to believe it. My room door suddenly slammed shut and my dad rushed out of his room. I gently pushed the door, peeked through the gap, and my heart stopped when I saw a figure hiding behind it. My mother woke up, her voice sleepy, but when I said, "My room window is wide open, someone did that?" she sat up worried. Dad burst into the room, turned on the light, and managed to see a person's leg jumping out the window. I screamed piercingly like a child calling out to my dad. "Dad, there's someone in my room." I went back, leaving my parents' door open and walked down the hallway, but as I got near my room, I saw the door was slightly ajar, even though I remembered leaving it open. I was sure it was Antonio or Bruno or both, so Dad called the police to report the break-in. Dad ran downstairs out the front door to chase them, but just a few minutes later he came back breathless. Didn't see anyone. I had to recount the entire story starting from the incident in the woods, and Dad confirmed my account. Looking back now, I regret agreeing to meet strangers in the woods at night. Fortunately, nothing else happened after that night, but I still felt disturbed. The police said there was no specific evidence, they couldn't do more, only advised us to lock our doors and install outdoor cameras. That fear still haunts me, reminding me of the danger of blind trust. In the following months, I lived in fear, finding it hard to sleep peacefully, constantly waking up startled by small noises. They looked like trouble from the first glance in the cafeteria, and I should have stayed away. When he called roll, I saw him stop and stare at me as if double-checking. In 9th grade in 2007, the last period of physical education took place on a stormy day, the sky gray and the wind howling fiercely. In my mind, I thought, why is he looking at me like that? Maybe because I look older than a 9th grader. The substitute teacher was an old man with gray hair, about 55-60 years old, with eyes that made me feel uncomfortable from the start. He told us to split into groups for volleyball, then disappeared into the hallway near the locker room. I walked into the locker room, trying to open my locker, but no matter how many times I tried, it wouldn't open. I wondered, did I forget the code I have to go ask the teacher? Waiting outside the office, I felt the cold, damp air from the storm outside the window spreading. I found him and explained the problem. He told me to wait a moment to get the list of locker codes. 40 minutes passed in waiting until dismissal time. Everyone rushed into the locker room to change clothes and go home, the space gradually becoming empty. He tried the codes from the notebook but failed every time, and each time he looked at me and smirked. My heart pounded fast, thinking, why is he coming in here? This doesn't feel right at all. I tried to smile back politely, but the strange feeling grew stronger, as if something was wrong. Finally, he appeared with an open notebook, then unexpectedly led me into the girls' locker room, where there was almost no one left except one girl who was changing. Fear surged. I stepped back, pushed his hand away, and said, "It's okay, I'm going to miss my bus." I waited until he was out the door, then quickly started changing clothes, my hands trembling. His hand stayed there, and when the code didn't work, I felt it move down my back, slowly giving me goosebumps. He tried one more time, and miraculously the locker opened. He smiled and then turned away. When he tried again, he put his hand on my shoulder and said, "We'll figure it out," his voice sounding odd. I quickly pulled up my pants in the dark, slammed the locker shut, then slung my backpack over my shoulder. Suddenly, the room lights went out. Darkness enveloped everything. Only the sound of the storm howling outside remained. I ran outside the pouring rain soaking me, then ran off the school grounds. Walking towards the back door leading outside, I thought, he might be waiting there. I need to be careful. In the dim light, I saw him, hiding behind the wall of lockers, watching me. Reaching the turn between the rows of lockers, I instinctively glanced to the right, where a little weak light from a high window shone down. Horror struck. I dashed towards the emergency exit, screaming in my head, "Run!" He called after me, Wait, it's not what you think." But I didn't stop. On the way home with rainwater streaming down, I realized he probably intentionally changed the locker code to keep me alone. His intention was terrifying, and I didn't dare think about what could have happened if the lights had gone out completely. I chose band class because I thought it would be an easy A, not as difficult as orchestra or choir. The grading policy was only based on attendance and weekly practice, so I thought I'd be fine. But by the end of the quarter, I missed 2 sessions resulting in a B, and I didn't want that. After school, I went to see Mr. Nicholson, asking if I could make up the practice sessions. I was too scared and ashamed to tell anyone, so I kept it a secret for many years, the haunting feeling still with me today. I happily accepted, but in my head I thought, well, I'll just go in there and play games on my phone for fun. He was hesitant at first, but finally agreed to let me practice in the basement storage room during lunch to get credit. I went down the stairs outside the music room leading to the basement of the music department. The next day at lunchtime, I went to the music room, grabbed my saxophone to make it look like I was going to practice. The atmosphere here was eerie. Students rarely came down. The light was dim, shadows lurked everywhere. I had only been down here a few times, so the unfamiliar feeling made me a little jumpy. Actually, I just intended to sit and play games on my phone, forgetting everything around me. I walked into a room, closed the door, and set up my music on the stand as if preparing to practice. Along the basement hallway, there were many small rooms, about 7 by 7 feet, used to store chairs, instrument stands, and decorations. While engrossed in the screen, suddenly the lights in the room went out, leaving only the weak light from my phone. Darkness enveloped everything so thick I couldn't see anything but the small screen. I tried flipping the light switch, but it had no effect, making me even more anxious. Using the light from my phone, like an old iPhone, not a strong flashlight, I tried to light the way. I stood up, stumbled in the dark, then opened the door to the hallway, which was also pitch black. The weak light was enough to see the end of the hallway where a door was slightly ajar. From there, I heard something being dragged, like a large plastic bin being moved. Along with it were sounds of rapid, wild breathing, then groans like animal noises. There was no phone signal here. I couldn't call for help, so the only option was to wait. I saw the large plastic bin being pushed into the hallway, and fear surged uncontrollably. Immediately, I turned off my phone screen and quickly backed into the storage room I had just left. Closing the door very softly, I held my breath, my heart pounding in the darkness. After a while, the lights still didn't come on, so I decided to try to get out. Stepping into the pitch black hallway, I tiptoed towards the stairs. In my head, I thought I have to hide. I don't know what that is, but it's blocking the way to the stairs. I opened the room door very quietly, turned my phone light back on to see. But then from the darkness, I heard the strange noises again, the dragging and the breathing. Scared, I quickly slipped into the nearest room with an open door, closing the door silently. I stood still listening for any sounds from outside, but only a terrifying silence enveloped everything. With trembling hands, I pressed the home button on my phone, only illuminating for a brief half-second. In the second storage room, the thick darkness made me doubt whether the stranger was staff or not, because everything only happened after the lights went out. Suddenly, a strong feeling that someone was very close, even though I didn't hear anything specific, made my skin crawl. I tried to pretend I didn't see them, but I knew it was too late, my heart pounding like it would burst. Then the silence was broken when a hand gently touched my shoulder, patting it twice, slowly. In that instant, I saw a figure standing in the corner of the room, only 3 feet away from me. Their face blurred in the darkness. In my mind, I wondered, could that be staff or security? But those noises, too bizarre, couldn't be a normal person. The hand began to squeeze tightly, causing pain, and I realized I had to run immediately. He immediately called the school security to check the basement. Pulling the door open forcefully, I rushed out, but the person tried to push the door back to block me. I lunged towards the door, fumbling in the dark to find the doorknob, my hand touching it after a few precious seconds. Fortunately, I escaped, running desperately up the stairs from the basement. As I burst out the door onto the main floor where the lights were still on, I was gasping for breath, my whole body trembling. I ran straight to Mr. Nicholson, quickly telling him, "Mr. Nicholson, there's someone in the basement. The lights went out, and they touched me." When security returned, they shook their heads. "There's no one down there, just some musical equipment that's been moved." They concluded that there were no cameras there, so they couldn't determine who cut the power to the basement. Mr. Nicholson canceled the remaining flute lesson, and I sat and told the detailed story to him and 5 flute students. Perhaps the person wanted to steal expensive equipment, and I didn't dare think about their other intentions. One night, sometime after that, my friends and I came up with a plan to sneak into the school basement. We chose an unrepaired broken window leading down to the basement with a short metal fence around the outside stairs. Climbing over the fence felt sneaky, even though it wasn't very high. We checked around to make sure there were no security cars. Jumping over the fence, we tried to squeeze through the narrow window, having to lift each other up and then crawl in. The next day, I was called to the principal's office to give an official account, but everything ended without anyone being caught. That's history. I saw a friend nearby whisper, "Let's go upstairs." The light was weak, only a small white light in the far corner and red light from the exit signs. Once in the basement, my friends scattered to explore. The atmosphere was messy and not interesting at all. We followed each other up the stairs, opening the door to the school's main hallway. I whispered, "Hey, this place is really creepy." Only the red exit signs flickered, creating an eerie atmosphere. When we got there, I was surprised because the entire hallway was pitch black. Not a single light was on. My friend replied in a low voice, "Yeah, it is." Suddenly, the thought that there might be someone else in the school besides us sent chills down my spine. He went into a stall and I whispered, Hurry up, this place is giving me the creeps. I followed my friend into the restroom where the red light from the exit sign flickered, creating a suffocating atmosphere. I waited in the dark, my heart pounding fast, then my phone vibrated. It was Chris calling. Chris's voice was surprised. "What do you mean Roland and Brandon are here with me?" Chris asked, "Where are you?" And I replied, "Upstairs with Roland or Brandon." I heard them confirm over the speaker and I stammered, not believing my ears. "No way." I looked up and saw a figure looking over the top of the stall, definitely standing on the toilet. A strange laugh echoed from the bathroom stall. Not my friend's laughter, but an unfamiliar, eerie laugh. The sound of the stall door slamming shut behind me made me run faster than ever. Panicked, I screamed into the phone, oh my God, then rushed out of the bathroom immediately. Running down the stairs, I shouted my friends' names. Chris, Roland. When they answered, I yelled, "Run, run," and we rushed towards the window to escape. I dashed towards the door leading down to the basement. The dark hallway made me stumble, but luckily, I found the way. They were pressing their hand against the glass, only half their face visible, blurred under the streetlights. Outside we gathered, and I recounted the incident in gasps mixed with nervous laughter, because we were safe. Each of us jumped onto a bin, climbed through the narrow window. I was the first one out, fear driving every step. We ran off the school grounds, not stopping until we were sure we were safe. Our laughter echoed, perhaps attracting attention, and when I looked up at the school window, I saw a figure. Afterward, I tried to find a logical explanation, but couldn't, and decided never to sneak into the school again. I whispered. "That's definitely him," and Roland yelled. "Run fast." In my freshman year of college, after moving into the dorm, and my family had just left, I felt strange. That afternoon, my roommate arrived, and I realized he was the most socially awkward person I had ever met. I introduced myself, "I'm Dan, nice to meet you," and extended my hand to shake. He stopped, looked at my hand, then smirked. "Oh!" Within minutes, we were sitting on our beds, each with our laptops, not saying a word. The handshake was weak, like a dead fish, and I had to ask, "What's your name?" "Dale." I tried to make conversation, but only got short yes or no answers accompanied by strange reactions. I felt uncomfortable, immediately thinking I have to request a roommate change. Initially, I thought Dale was just an awkward kid, but later I realized he was more than that. That evening, after meeting some interesting people on my floor, I returned to my room. Dale was still sitting in the same position as when I left, his eyes glued to his laptop. By 9:30 p.m., I turned off my light and tried to sleep, but sleep didn't come right away. I asked anything up Dale, but he didn't answer, as if he didn't hear me. In that silver light, I saw Dale sitting by my bed staring at me. I fell asleep right after Dale closed his laptop at 3 a.m., exhaustion washing over me like a wave. But only about an hour later, I woke up startled by the strange light filling the room. I lay there watching Dale hunched over his computer until 3 a.m., the screen light illuminating his lifeless face. My heart pounded. I sat up, rubbed my eyes, and asked Dale, "What is it? What are you doing?" The blinds had been opened, moonlight illuminating everything, creating an unsettling dim darkness. He whispered sorry, then immediately lay down as if nothing had happened. I participated in orientation activities on campus, feeling relieved to be outside. The next morning, Saturday, I woke up and found Dale gone. This was the first time he had left the room. As I walked through the campus garden, I heard other students whispering, "What is that kid doing over there?" They were talking about Dale, who was sitting in a bush, rubbing the bark as if talking to it. I greeted him, "Oh hey, what's up?" and he simply replied, "Nothing." I made friends with those two and arranged to meet tonight, feeling like things were looking up. The orientation leader didn't notice, and I walked past without saying anything, my heart full of confusion. I told them that's my roommate to start a conversation, and they apologized. We shared a nervous laugh. When I got back to the dorm, I learned the school had found me a new roommate. Things seemed better. That evening, I left the room to meet my new friend, but when I returned, Dale was sitting on a chair facing the door. I sat on my bed, opened my laptop, then realized it wasn't locked, and all my emails, even unread ones, were open. Many folders had also been rummaged through. I knew for sure Dale had gone through my stuff. I confronted him. "Did you go through my laptop?" And he immediately yelled, "No," but I didn't believe him. Deciding not to argue further, I got ready for bed, trying to ignore the anger. I didn't say anything, knowing I would have a new roommate in the morning. Sitting up, I saw Dale kneeling on the floor, going through my backpack. In the middle of the night, I woke up again, and this time I heard the clinking sound of a zipper. As I went through my things to get my pajamas, I felt my clothes had been moved, a clear sign of intrusion. I turned on the light and confronted him. "Dale, what are you doing?" He tried to justify it. "I thought you took my toothbrush by mistake," his voice fake. The next morning, I met my new roommate. Everything went well. He was much more pleasant. I knew it was a lie, and there was something seriously wrong with him, but I restrained myself from acting. On Sunday evening, we had a decent conversation before turning off the lights to sleep. But that night, I woke up for the third consecutive time hearing a strange clicking sound. The sound was irregular, heard at least twice every 30 seconds, giving me goosebumps. I sat up, decided to check, hoping it was just a heavy bag on the floor or some mouse. The noise seemed to be coming from the other side of the room door. I crept out of bed, trying to find the source of the strange clicking sound. I pressed my eye against the peephole where the weak light from the nightlight illuminated the common area. Through the small hole, I only saw the scalp of someone standing there, bending their head down. Fear surged, and I quickly called the university police immediately. In less than 5 minutes, they were in the common area, and I felt safer opening the door. Their face wasn't clear, but I realized the clicking sound was from the doorknob. They were trying to unlock it. When I opened it, I saw the police handcuffing Dale. He was the intruder. The police took Dale away, and I don't know if he was suspended or expelled afterward. I never saw Dale again, and the rest of my college years passed peacefully. But that terrifying experience still occasionally haunts me like a ghost in my dreams. I explained to them Dale was my old roommate, had gone through my belongings leading to the room change, and was now trying to break in. We often hung out on weekends and things seemed brighter. We chose the school's nature preserve, specifically by the lake. Transferring to Binghamton University for my freshman year after 2 years elsewhere, I quickly made friends with a large group. Suddenly he stopped and said, "Shush." One Friday evening in October, the main group didn't have big plans, so I decided to hang out with 2 close friends. That place was sometimes used by students for discreet activities, but not many people knew about it. That evening, we brought beer, built a fire, and chatted like brothers. The destination was a small clearing on the far side of the lake where it was convenient to build a fire because it was out of sight of security. Time flew by as the alcohol started to take effect. We laughed loudly, one friend rolling on the ground. I quickly threw my beer bottle into the lake because we weren't 21 yet and were afraid of getting caught. We fell silent, listening, and heard the sound of leaves and dry branches being stepped on in the distance. The sound indicated there was only one person in the distance. The burning fire made our location obvious, and this place was rarely frequented by others. We just sat in dead silence, signaling each other to stay quiet. Then a branch snapped crack not far from us, causing fear to surge higher than ever. Stuffing the remaining bottles into my backpack, I felt my anxiety increase because the alcohol made me more prone to panic. The whole group panicked, but no one dared to confront or shout. The sounds came again, seemingly someone circling our campsite. Suddenly, a loud thud echoed, making all 3 of us jump, a powerful impact in the dark night. Fear surged because it was clear someone was intentionally targeting us. It felt like being in The Blair Witch Project, with the echoing sounds of breaking branches and rustling leaves sounding like they were right next to us. The sounds got closer and closer, making us try to laugh it off to dispel the fear, but I was truly panicked, not knowing where it was coming from. One friend immediately disappeared into the darkness, leaving me and the other one sitting there, half laughing, half worried, wondering if it was a prank. Continuing to run, reaching safety on my friend's floor, we saw the first friend had already returned to his room. But the situation escalated when the remaining friend cried out in pain. Another branch had struck him in the face. I quickly grabbed my backpack, pulled my friend up, and we ran desperately towards the dorm, not daring to look back. At first we were confused, but then we realized a large branch had been thrown directly into the middle of the fire, making the flames flare up and ash fly everywhere. Running to the road separating the nature preserve and the dorm, we stopped to catch our breath, but heard footsteps chasing us further, confirming we were being pursued. Each time a car drove by, the figure retreated into the woods, then finally disappeared completely, never to reappear. But the next morning, I realized the true horror of the previous night, and from then on, we rarely returned to the woods at night. Looking out the window, down at the woods, I saw a figure pacing back and forth at the edge of the woods, appearing and disappearing under the headlights of passing cars. Transferring to the University of Iowa for my freshman year, the first week I started getting to know my new roommate. Back in the room, we continued to drink beer to relieve stress, and within 10 minutes, all 3 of us were laughing and talking about what had just happened as a way to cope. Thursday evening, we went to the party, probably the least popular fraternity kind of underground. The plan, a fraternity party on Thursday, then others on Friday and Saturday. He was focused on joining a fraternity, and rush week was about to start, but the parties had already kicked off on Thursday. My roommate thought of this as a backup option if other fraternities didn't accept him. My roommate wanted me to go with him to make friends easily, and I agreed. Even though I wasn't interested in Rush, just wanted to enjoy being at a school known for partying. The place was far from campus, in a poor downtown area. We stopped the car in front of a corner house. Inside was a dimly lit, incredibly hot room, about 50 guys crammed into the living room. The house didn't look like a fraternity house at all, only thanks to the loud music and parked cars as if they had just picked a random spot. The atmosphere was suffocating. The light was weak, making me feel uncomfortable from the first minute. I continued to drink cheap beer, having to have about 5 cups before feeling slightly drunk. We endured for about 20 minutes trying to make conversation, but then I signaled to my roommate that we should leave. However, the crowd blocked the door, so we decided to wait longer to avoid an awkward situation. Knocking on the door, a short, overweight guy wearing a white shirt holding a cup of alcohol, his shirt soaked with sweat, greeted us and told us to come right in. The party atmosphere was really disappointing, with only about 2 decent-looking girls. The rest were all overweight guys, exuding an antisocial vibe. Finally, I took a sip, estimating about 2 shots of hard liquor. Suddenly, a big guy approached, holding a small bottle and handing it to me, smirking, "This will get you drunk." I could dimly make out some furniture and a small closet door. I gave a fake laugh, thanked him, hoping he would leave, but he stood there, staring, waiting for me to drink. He started talking, keeping me there, and every time I tried to leave, he pulled me into a one-sided conversation. I woke up in a pitch-black room, lying on a bed, my head spinning, and panicked. Faint music from behind the closed door confirmed I was still in the fraternity house. Fear surged. I rushed out of the room, ran down the stairs to the crowded living room. Before long, everything started to blur. I felt dizzy. The room went dark, and that was the last thing I remember before passing out. On the way back to the dorm, I said I was drugged. Amidst the loud music, I heard a strange noise, the sound of plastic bags being crunched from inside the closet as if someone was in there. Finding my roommate, I pushed him towards the door, squeezing through the crowd. That was the most terrifying experience of my life. Checking my watch, only about 10 minutes had passed, maybe whatever it was didn't work. My roommate suggested calling the police, but I advised against it as there was no clear evidence and it would be useless. He awkwardly asked, "Were you taken advantage of?" And I replied, "I wasn't in pain, my clothes were still on, so probably not." The knock was so light it was almost inaudible. I yelled, "Come in." By the first semester of sophomore year, I had my own dorm room in the corner of the floor, quite isolated. The room was in a hidden spot. You had to turn a corner to see the door, which provided privacy, but also a feeling of isolation. A few weeks later, while studying biology in my quiet room, a soft sound echoed, a light knock on the door. The door didn't open. I got up and opened it, but there was no one in the hallway. I walked to the corner of the hallway and looked around, still no one in sight, thinking someone was playing a prank. Returning to my room, I left the door open and continued studying, but no one came back. The next evening, just as I turned off the lights to go to sleep, the knocking came again, this time louder, like a hard knock. The small hallway was empty, no one in sight, only a terrifying silence remained. Finally, gathering all my courage, I jumped out of bed and rushed to the door, opening it quickly. I hesitated, lying there under the covers, my heart pounding, not knowing whether to confront it or pretend to stay asleep. Adrenaline surged. I ran as fast as I could, my feet pounding on the cold hallway floor. This time I didn't stop. I ran straight into the main hallway, deciding to chase the stranger. I woke up after 3 hours of sleep. On the third night, the knocking on the door echoing more strongly than ever, as if someone was trying to break the peace of the darkness. Turning the corner, I managed to see the back of a figure disappearing around the far corner on the opposite side. Just as I turned into that hallway, I saw a door closing at the end. It was the bathroom door. I felt a mix of anger and fear, deciding to confront the person who was messing with me. Turning on the light, I scanned around, hoping to see someone, but it was empty at first. Pushing the bathroom door open forcefully, I stepped inside, but it was pitch black inside. Under one stall, I saw 2 heavy black boots, as if someone was standing silently in there. I checked the 2 toilet stalls, both were closed, so I knelt down and looked under the door gaps. Back in bed, I tried to calm down by texting all my friends, but they were all fast asleep, no one replied. Fear enveloped me, making my limbs weak. I turned and ran back to my room, slammed the door shut, my heart pounding like a drum. The next morning, I asked everyone on the floor, but they all shook their heads, saying they didn't hear anything, and it wasn't them playing a prank. Immediately, a chilling cackle echoed, cutting through the faint music from the hallway like the sound of a crazy old man, aged and full of malice. Gasping for breath, I pushed the stall door open, but when it opened, only the pair of boots were there, no one wearing them. an inexplicable sight. The knocking on the door came again one last time that night, lasting about 30 seconds, then suddenly stopped, leaving a terrifying silence. In my elective class, my friend JJ and I were constantly messing around. Entering my senior year of high school, I was hit with senioritis, feeling lazy and just wanting to get through the days until graduation. Football season began, and our school took it seriously because the team was strong while the town had no other activities. That day was a Friday. There was a football game that night, so we decided to go watch it together. I believed them, but the mystery still hung in the air. Why was that person targeting me, and who could be an old man with such a bizarre laugh? After school, JJ dropped me off at home to rest, then came back to pick me up 4 hours later. We sat in the car, had a few drinks to relax, but carefully checked around to make sure no one saw us. On the way, we stopped to pick up Kayla and Ashley, then drove to the parking lot behind the school near the woods. JJ invited 2 female friends, Kayla and Ashley, since we had known them for a long time, and they agreed to meet up later. We poured alcohol into water bottles to take with us into the stands, choosing the top row for a good view. The game ended with a crushing defeat. The field and stands quickly emptied, leaving only the sound of a gentle breeze. The game started late, and by the 3rd or 4th quarter, darkness enveloped everything with only the stadium lights and a faint moon. Everyone rushed to leave. The home team ran into the locker room in shame, while the visiting team slowly boarded their bus. The home team lost badly. Students started leaving early, but we decided to stay, planning to wander onto the field after the game. Within 10 minutes, we were almost the last ones in the stands, plus a few lone figures on the field. Everyone else disappeared, leaving us with a mysterious space. By this time, we were drunk, not caring about the outcome, and when the stadium lights went out, everything plunged into thick darkness with only the faint moonlight. We moved down onto the field, lay down to relax, and JJ ran back to the car to get more alcohol. It was probably around 10 p.m. then. The girls hesitated, but JJ and I got up and ran towards the woods, leaving them behind, hoping they would be scared and follow, and they did. They tried to catch up, but we succeeded, hiding behind large trees, laughing to ourselves. We squeezed through a ripped hole in the fence, an unofficial entrance, then went down a small slope into the deep woods. The girls reluctantly followed, while JJ and I ran faster, intentionally losing them to hide and play a prank. JJ suggested, "Hey, let's go into the woods next to the football field." The idea sounded appealing because of its creepiness, even though the girls were scared. That was impossible, completely unnatural, and we spun around and ran desperately. The shape was terrifying. A tall black figure illuminated by the weak moonlight filtering through the leaves, making my blood run cold. The black figure spoke in a woman's voice. "You children shouldn't be here." Simple words, but full of threat. After a few seconds of laughing, JJ tapped me on the shoulder and pointed, "Look!" And despite the thick darkness, we saw a huge black figure about 15 feet away, standing between 2 trees. The girls were panicked, asking if we were joking, but our faces were enough for them to believe us. We stood still staring, then realized the black figure seemed to be growing and approaching very quickly, without seeing any feet moving or hearing any footsteps. We yelled the girls' names, found them, and pulled them running out of the woods, ordering, "Just follow us back to the car and run." We decided to go to JJ's house to relax, trying to forget the fear that lingered from that night. That area wasn't a nature trail, and the school had no security at that time, making everything even more confusing. Fast forward to that summer, I returned to school one last time with a temporary management job, working as a summer cleaner. When we were safe, we recounted. I saw a woman about 7 feet tall in the woods, and JJ added, "If you hadn't seen it too, I would have thought it was a hallucination." From the car, we watched the woods, waiting to see if anyone would come out. But nothing happened, and the biggest question was, why would an older woman be in this fenced-off woods at midnight? I worked as a summer cleaner at my old school, earning extra pay each season, proving this wasn't my first time here. While mowing the lawn in the courtyard, I looked up and saw a figure in an upstairs window. The team consisted of only 4 people, 2 older staff members, myself, and another 18-year-old kid. My boss looked at me in surprise. "What woman?" I ran inside to find my boss, asking urgently, "Who is that woman upstairs?" I stopped the lawnmower and waved hello, but she didn't respond, just stood still, sending chills down my spine. It was an older woman, about 65, with short, permed hair, her face blurred behind the reflection from the window. I pulled my boss along, saying she's in one of the math classrooms, and led the way up the upstairs hallway. I followed, my heart full of confusion and genuine fear. After that, I continued my work, mopping the floors in the upstairs hallway and classrooms. My boss shook his head. "There's no one here. Go drink some coffee. Stop imagining things." Then went back downstairs. When we got there, all the classroom doors were closed, the lights were off, and the classroom where I saw her was empty. Goosebumps rose, a fight or flight feeling surged, my heart pounded. Reaching the math hallway, I opened all the classroom doors, turned on the lights, and played music on the radio while I worked. I quickly turned off the music, checked each nearby classroom, hoping to find someone, but they were all empty even behind the desks and chairs. I rushed downstairs telling my boss, "Someone is up there?" I can hear her voice now. My boss really thought I was crazy. Amidst the music, I clearly heard a woman's voice. "Young man." The words echoed unclear from which classroom. My boss followed me up again, but once more found nothing, and my boss said, "Go home, take a day off, you're imagining too much." I connected the two incidents, the figure in the woods and now the ghost at school. Were they related? The teacher, a jokester, made him introduce himself. A few months later, a new student walked into the first astronomy class. The next day, I told my boss I didn't want to work in the math hallway anymore because I was too scared and I avoided that area all summer. I was certain that the old school was haunted by the spirit of an older woman, as there was no other explanation. I was sitting in the back row and the only empty seat was next to me in the corner. His name was Craig, and the teacher teased him a bit before telling him to sit down. Craig came and sat down. Class hadn't started yet, people were murmuring. Moving on to my sophomore year of high school, when I was 15, lunch periods were assigned randomly, so friends like Liam and Mike were in the same class. After sitting down, Craig looked around the room, then his eyes stopped on me. I replied, "Hey man, what's up?" Craig introduced himself and I said my name. I turned, met his gaze, and Craig nodded. "What's up?" Craig looked like a normal guy, nothing remarkable, and he started making small talk in class. Craig was a white kid with a patchy mustache that looked like pubic hair, not very attractive, but not ugly either. We used computers for assignments, and quickly I realized Craig's sense of humor was not normal. I politely responded because I felt for a new student, and maybe I was the first person he officially met here. He joked too much, acting as if we had been best friends for a long time, but his jokes were really weird. His laughter sounded cringy, accompanied by constant cursing and non-stop vulgar jokes. Lunchtime came, and today Mike was absent, so it was just Liam and me at our usual table. I'm not the sensitive type, but this was too much, and by the end of class, we exchanged phone numbers for the project. I suddenly noticed Liam looking up behind me, and then someone pulled up a chair and sat down next to me. Turning back, I saw Craig. He patted me on the shoulder and said, "What's up, buddy?" in a fake familiar tone. Liam also tried to be nice at first, but then Craig started saying weird things again. I was dead inside, realizing Craig would probably sit here every day, but I tried to be positive and give him a chance. Opening it, I realized it was Craig Turnaround. The short message sent chills down my spine. That feeling went beyond just being eccentric. There was a darkness about him from the awful things he said. Liam exchanged knowing glances with me, when Craig wasn't looking, confirming that something was off with Craig. I stopped and waited for him to catch up, trying to stay calm. Turning around, I saw Craig running on the sidewalk towards me, waving, and I thought to myself, oh God. Craig asked me how far I lived from school. I replied, about a 10-minute walk. On Friday afternoon, I was walking home and texting the group about plans when I got a text from an unknown number. Yes, he followed me all the way home. Then he asked if we could do the assignment together and handle it with a few beers, trying to pull me into a private situation. He said he lived the same distance and declared he would walk with me even though I didn't invite him. I made up an excuse that Liam's mom didn't allow strangers in, and it seemed to work. I refused, saying I was busy with friends, but Craig kept asking what I would be doing. Clearly he was trying to butt in. Even so, Craig still walked home with me, and I wondered to myself, is he following me? I said, "All right, man, see you later," and gave a fist bump, hoping he would leave. When I said I would be relaxing at Liam's house, he asked if it would be okay if he came, and I didn't know what to say. Back home, I texted the group about how weird Craig was, and Liam completely agreed. We planned to hang out at Liam's house at 9 p.m. Craig replied, "See you later," then continued walking, but I saw him look back, which sent a shiver down my spine. I replied, confused, "What do you mean?" and rushed out onto the porch. He asked, "I thought you were going to your friend Liam's place." I replied briefly, "Yeah, in a little bit," trying to stay calm. There were no police cars, but the terrifying thing was Craig was standing in my driveway. He laughed loudly, acting like a total weirdo, and I realized how dangerous he was. Craig laughed loudly and said I got you in a triumphant tone, as if his prank was the most normal thing in the world. An hour or two later, a text from Craig panicked me. Yo, what's going on in front of your house? Why are there police cars? Unable to stand it anymore, I asked him directly. Why are you being weird? Craig suddenly stopped laughing, his expression turned angry as if I had touched a taboo subject. I quickly said I gotta go inside, then went into the house, slammed the door shut, my heart pounding. I stood there, speechless, wondering why someone I just met today was haunting me like this. Immediately, texts from Craig flooded in, bro, what the heck, full of annoyance and disbelief. Then I realized he had tricked me into coming outside to check if I was home. A clear manipulation. I texted back, you're freaking me out, bro, but as soon as I sent it, I knew it was a mistake. After that, I left home and went straight to Liam's house to get away from everything. To escape, I emailed the teacher requesting to do the assignment alone and explaining the situation with Craig. I screenshotted the texts and sent them to my friend group. They were both laughing and shocked at how weird it was. Craig replied with a long text full of disappointment. He thought I was chill and different, but now I was just like everyone else, words that showed his arrogance and distorted perception. Suddenly, the back door bell rang different from the front door, which startled me. I locked the door carefully before going up to my room, turned on YouTube to relax. I opened the main door, leaving the screen door locked, and called out hello. At Liam's house, Craig still didn't give up. He called constantly, but I ignored him, only thinking about how uncomfortable the upcoming Monday class would be. Getting home late around 11 or 12 a.m., my parents and sister weren't home yet, which was normal at my house. I went downstairs thinking it might be my sister, but when I looked out, the backyard light was off and I didn't see anyone through the glass door. My phone rang. It was Craig again. I slammed the door shut and locked it, immediately ran upstairs to call my dad, but he didn't answer. Then I clearly heard the sound of shoes scraping on the concrete patio to the left out of sight, a sound confirming someone was hiding. I replied, I'm calling the police, and fortunately, Craig replied, okay, I'm leaving. I breathed a sigh of relief, realizing he had been lurking in the backyard waiting for me to come out. I ignored the call and he texted, come outside, you coward, a direct provocation proving he was the one out there. The next morning, I sent screenshots of the texts to my family, friends, and the school to contact Craig's parents. Moving to a new place, I lived in rural New Brunswick, the beginning of September, the first day of school. I knew most of the students because the school was small, so everything was quite familiar. It turned out his family moved constantly because he caused trouble at every school. An alarming pattern of behavior. I walked over and introduced myself. During the first study hall period, I saw a strange kid on the other side of the room, someone I had never met before. At 19, I was repeating my senior year held back, and the school here combined middle school and high school in the same building due to the remote area. His name was Chester, and he said he had just moved here. I speculated about the horrible things he might have done to others who had rejected him, and fortunately, Craig didn't show up for class on Monday, or any day after that. Perhaps he transferred schools again. I helped Chester get acquainted with the school, showing him where his next class was. By the last period English class, the class was tiny, only about 9 students, because it was the most basic level. Chester seemed a little off when I gave him a tour of the school, an indescribable feeling I couldn't ignore. He kept staring at me, then motioned for me to come closer. He motioned again, but I continued to pretend to be busy reading my book. I sat down and glanced back, seeing Chester on the opposite side gnawing on a disgusting sandwich, looking like something spoiled and hard to swallow. I was completely shocked finding the request strange and inappropriate, so I refused to give my address. But for some reason I gave him my Snapchat handle. As we walked, he asked all sorts of questions, from normal ones like, how long have you been going here, or where are the classrooms, to weirder ones, especially when he suddenly asked for my home address and my Snapchat. I ignored him because Mr. Best was about to start the lesson, but 5 minutes later I looked up. Chester was still staring now, looking even angrier. Then my phone buzzed, a Snapchat message from Chester, follow me. A direct and controlling instruction that made me uncomfortable. He opened a door and walked in, slamming it shut. Curious to know what he was planning, I waited 5 minutes, then also asked permission to go to the restroom. I replied, I can't. We're in the middle of class, but he stood up, asked Mr. Best for permission to go to the restroom, then walked out into the hallway. Outside, I looked around the hallway, didn't see him anywhere, then spotted Chester walking very slowly about 50 feet away. My inner voice screamed, no way in hell I was going down there, so I calmly returned to class. I kept my distance to avoid being seen following him as he turned into a less used hallway, mainly for storage, restrooms, and offices. As soon as I sat down, my phone buzzed again, a message from Chester on Snapchat. I approached the door, realizing it was the door leading down to the school basement. a place I didn't want to go near because of old stories. First, why didn't you enter the basement, proving he was watching me? Third, come down here, an eerie, persistent invitation or command. Now I was truly freaked out, a chill running down my spine. Second, a photo of him eating that disgusting sandwich in the basement as if to prove his location. I replied, "Leave me alone," then deleted and blocked him on Snapchat. While cleaning up my phone buzzed, someone added me as a friend on Snapchat. Back home, I threw myself into homework to forget about it. Finishing around 11 p.m., the house was empty. The account, "Why didn't you enter the basement?" Clearly Chester with a new account. I blocked it immediately, but just a few minutes later, another invitation, "Why'd you block me?" The dispatcher instructed, "Find a safe place to hide and lock the door." Blocked again. Then a third invitation, "I know where you live." Now this was truly concerning. "Next, I'm right outside your house." A direct threat that made my heart pound. Immediately, I heard the sound of breaking glass downstairs, a sound like someone was breaking in. After hearing the sound of breaking glass, I immediately called the police, my voice trembling as I told the dispatcher what was happening. I hung up and rushed into the hallway closet, slammed the door shut, my heart pounding in the darkness. Footsteps echoed from downstairs, slowly moving up to the floor as if someone was searching step by step. He didn't seem to realize I was here yet, just standing still as if observing. His footsteps faded going downstairs, leaving a terrifying silence. Then he turned his head towards the closet, but still unsure, causing me to quickly retreat deeper behind a large storage bin to hide. Just a few seconds later, a knock on the door echoed. It was the police. The closet door opened and I heard Chester rummaging his hand, fumbling for the light switch, but he wasn't successful and finally gave up. I slightly opened the closet door, trying to look through the gap, and in the dim light, I saw Chester standing at the end of the hallway, confirming that he was the intruder. That sent chills down my spine because he was here truly. I gave the police the Snapchat account so they could track them. They promised to try, but I wasn't very optimistic. I rushed out and opened the door quickly, telling them everything, but when they checked, Chester had disappeared from the area, escaping through the basement window of the house. We checked the cameras to see how he got into the school, and the footage showed him sneaking through the back door and blending into the crowd. Since then, I haven't seen Chester at school, and the police haven't provided any further updates. The next day at school, I reported Chester to the principal. And here's the creepiest part. The principal said there was no student named Chester here, no record of him. The question still haunts me, why did he want me to go down to the school basement, an unsolved mystery? That day was a Friday, and we, myself, Tyler, and Christian, planned to skip class again. We met behind the school intending to walk to the nearby McDonald's, but had to avoid the administrators and security. We started our walk hoping to avoid any trouble. I concluded that Chester was probably the most dangerous person I had ever met, and to this day, I still don't know his true intentions. The safest route was through the nature trail through the woods behind the school. Longer, but less risk of getting caught. Less than 5 minutes later, we encountered a kid I had never seen before. Moving on to the spring of 2018. My last semester of high school. I had no motivation for studying anymore, suffering from senioritis, often skipping school with friends. His hair was full of leaves and dirt, looking as if he had been rolling around on the ground all day. We approached him, and Christian recognized him as a younger student. I thought to myself, that doesn't explain how dirty he was. At first I thought he was just another student skipping class, no big deal. But then a feeling of unease arose. This time I wasn't sure. He was wearing jeans and a white t-shirt, both disgustingly dirty, covered in green and brown stains, especially on the knees. The kid didn't laugh. Along his face turned almost angry. His eyes narrowed, creating a sudden tension. Christian started a conversation, but I quickly noticed the kid looked a little out of breath and nervous. His eyes kept glancing towards me and Tyler. We hesitated, but were curious, so we nodded, unsure of what was about to happen. It felt like he was almost suspicious of us, and when Christian asked him what he was doing here with his clothes so dirty, he just replied that he had been skipping school all day. Tyler joked, "You must be camping out here, huh?" Which made us, me, Tyler, and Christian, laugh slightly in relief. Christian spoke up, his voice trembling. "Dude, what are you doing? Where did you get that?" The kid pointed towards the trail behind him, saying he found it an explanation that sounded too vague and suspicious. He lifted his shirt, and then we saw a handgun tucked into his waistband. A cold metal object, real and terrifying. We took a few steps back, self-preservation instinct kicking in, and I felt a real fear surge seeing a real weapon for the first time in my life. The kid started looking around nervously, then turned back to us, asking, "Hey, do you guys want to see something?" His voice trembling as if challenging us. We looked at each other, no words needed. We understood each other perfectly. We had to run immediately. We ran through the trees, hearts pounding for about 5 tense minutes. Without warning, all three of us turned our backs and dashed away, running at full speed off the trail, plunging into the dense woods. Finally, we burst out into the school parking lot, and the scene unfolded: police cars everywhere, flashing lights, a chaotic atmosphere. We were gasping for breath, drenched in sweat, and utterly terrified, not understanding what was happening. Without stopping, each of us only thought about running home, so we scattered, disappearing from the scene. Later, I learned more details. The kid was a 9th grader, had been skipping school all day, and he took the gun from a parked car nearby. He posted a threat online targeting the school. The content was described as creepy and disturbing. I didn't see it directly. Another student discovered it and reported it to a teacher. The school immediately went into lockdown, and the police were called quickly. He was spotted coming out of the trail and heading towards the school, then he was arrested. There were rumors that he wasn't taking his medication properly, leading to this behavior, but I'm not sure if that's true or not. Overall, I just wish that experience had never happened. Christian advised, "You should get rid of that and get out of here." But the kid replied in an incredibly creepy tone, "I don't think you guys understand. I'm about to be in a lot of trouble." Words that carried a dark despair, sending chills down my spine. Looking back, I realized we were in a truly dangerous situation based on his threats. We, myself, Tyler, and Christian, decided not to tell anyone about the encounter to avoid getting dragged into trouble. Moving on to another time when I was still at my old school, I was involved in the school play. The time was around 8 p.m. when the school was empty after school hours. It wasn't mandatory, but I thought it would help the older custodian, who would surely appreciate it. There was a lot of preparation work, and I volunteered to work the night shift to help out. A conflicting thought, maybe we slowed down his actions, but the question still haunts me. If we hadn't blocked his path, would the school have reacted in time? I, along with my friend and the older custodian, were working in the school auditorium late in the evening, around 8 o'clock. The setup work for the play went smoothly, but the silent atmosphere of the empty school made everything feel strange. When my friend and I needed to use the restroom, we left the stage and walked along a separate hallway, which was often sectioned off and not used much, mainly to get to that restroom. The feeling of being watched sent chills down my spine, a cold fear spreading. Continuing on, we approached the restroom and realized one of the cameras on the ceiling was on. This was completely unusual, as they rarely worked. In the restroom, I told my friend about the camera, and though he hadn't noticed at first, had to admit it was creepy. The closet door was always locked tight, so when we walked past, seeing the closet door slightly ajar, not enough to see inside, but clearly not fully closed, made us stop, a feeling of unease rising. This hallway had a utility closet with a security camera monitor and cleaning supplies, but that closet was rarely open, and the school cameras were usually just for show. No one really checked them. I clearly saw the red light flashing, and worse, the camera was moving slightly, following us as we walked, as if someone was controlling it to stare at us. All three of us went back to the hallway. Both of us felt panicked, knowing it was just us, the custodian, and no one else in the building, so we decided to go back to the stage a different way to avoid that hallway. Back at the stage, we told the custodian, hoping for a simple explanation, like another staff member was there, but his face showed genuine, unconcealed worry. He suggested we should go check it out, which I absolutely didn't want to do, but feeling guilty about letting him go alone, we agreed. The custodian tried to open the door, but it was locked, and when he knocked, no one answered. The custodian led them to the closet, while my friend and I stayed and waited. When we got near the utility closet, we saw the door was now completely closed, another change that made my heart beat faster. We went back to the stage to wait for the police, and after about 10 minutes, 2 police officers arrived. Just a few seconds later, hurried footsteps approached. It turned out to be the custodian. I didn't know what to think about this. He had a key, but seeing the hallway camera was on and working, he decided to call the police instead of opening it himself, a sign that he realized the situation was serious. We tried to ask for more details, but he refused, just directed us to the back door. Only a minute passed then, from a distance we heard terrible sounds, screaming followed by gunshots. A series of violent sounds that froze the blood in my veins. He said everything was fine, but we had to get out of here immediately, his voice full of urgency not matching his words. That was the first time I truly felt how close death could be, the fear freezing us in place, not knowing what to do, but sit and listen. The full story would be revealed later, but until then, the fear still haunted me. We rushed into the car and drove home. The feeling was like a terrifying nightmare, impossible to describe. The man in the closet was in his late 40s, and he had been living there as a secret hideout. After that incident happened, I spent a lot of time thinking about what was really hidden in that utility closet, and finally the truth was revealed. He was injured, but not life-threateningly, and was detained while waiting for an ambulance. He had probably gotten the closet key somehow and seemed to have been there day and night, turning the place into his personal shelter. With access to the camera monitor, he could watch everything in the school even when students were in class, a serious violation that sent shivers down my spine. Fortunately, the following school year, I transferred schools, escaping that place and starting over. When the police opened the door, they found him sitting in the corner with a weapon in his hand. A tense situation that led to them having to defend themselves, and the gunshots rang out. Because the closet was rarely used by cleaning staff, he avoided attention, and I don't want to think about how long he was in there. After that night, I never looked at my old school the same way again. The feeling of safety was completely shattered. Moving on to another period, a few years ago when I was still at my old school, near the end of the semester. We played 2-on-2, feeling free, and were rarely caught, although we could be seen. The police didn't know the exact motive it could have been due to difficult circumstances, but the more terrifying possibility is ill intentions, especially with that weapon. A mystery I try to keep out of my mind. As we were starting the game, a group of about 4 or 5 young men who looked like college students approached. A few friends, including me, impulsively ran into the woods a bit to see what was happening. One of them looked up, stared directly at us, and I felt fear surge. They seemed surprised to see us, apologized, and explained they thought we were someone else. This made me feel a little strange. The moment the game ended, all of us turned towards the woods when we heard a horrific, blood-curdling scream. My friends didn't even notice them until they spoke, and then the group went straight into the woods, a strange but not threatening action, so we continued playing. We, 4 friends, decided to skip class to play basketball at the court near the school, right next to the woods, a place we often frequented, even though we weren't sure if it belonged to the school. Back in class, we made up excuses to avoid suspicion, our hearts full of worry. We clearly saw 2 large men, their faces covered with masks, attacking the group of college students with baseball bats. A scene of sudden violence that made my heart clench. We immediately ran back to school, went inside, and with regret, we did nothing to intervene, only focusing on getting out of there. Somehow the school found out about the incident. They immediately went into full lockdown, but fortunately things didn't escalate further. I learned that the attack was the result of a drug deal gone wrong, a dark reason that made everything even more terrifying. In the following days, rumors spread quickly about what really happened, a terrifying story we tried to forget. The masked attackers were never caught or identified. They disappeared like ghosts, leaving an unfillable void of fear. 4th grade was the last year my parents had to pick us up, because from 5th grade, students could walk home by themselves. Even now, I can't stop thinking about how we could have been mistaken for that group of students and how horrific the consequences would have been if we had been violently attacked. The group of college students was seriously injured. Some had to be hospitalized, and I wasn't surprised given what we witnessed. That scene of violence was deeply imprinted in my mind, going back to a distant memory from the last day of 4th grade. A time so long ago, so the details are hazy, but the feeling is still clear. My mom usually picked me up, but that day we had plans to play with my friend Dennis, a friend since kindergarten, even though he was in a different class. The image of the masked person looking directly into my eyes still haunts me like a scar on my soul. And for the rest of the semester, that story dominated every conversation, making us live in constant fear. A man waved and approached, introduced himself as Dennis's uncle, and said he would pick me up. After school, we lined up and walked out the door with our teacher, Miss Blue, then waited outside in the yard. I felt a little strange, but didn't think much of it as he looked normal and confident. I ran over to Miss Blue and said I'm being picked up. We were waiting for Dennis's dad to appear among the crowd of parents when I heard a voice calling, "Tommy? Tommy?" I followed him through the crowd. She asked, "Where is he, sweetie?" And I pointed towards the man who waved hello to her. He led me quickly, talking animatedly with a slight stutter, making me struggle to keep up even with a heavy backpack. Miss Blue nodded and let me go. A moment I later realized was a mistake, as trusting an adult had put me in danger. We reached the dark red hatchback car, and the big problem was my friend wasn't there at all. He explained that Dennis's dad was working late, so he would drive me home. But I started to feel confused. Why wasn't Dennis here? He turned back to look at me in the back seat and said, "Dennis is already home," a lie I didn't realize at that moment. In my head, it clicked. Where is Dennis? Why aren't we picking him up? I was a shy kid, not daring to ask when I felt confused, and things were getting more and more illogical. The car ride lasted about 10 minutes longer than the familiar town, and I realized we were in an unfamiliar area, not where I knew. He stopped the car in front of a house that looked pretty normal from the outside, like any other house. Throughout the ride, he talked constantly, telling stories and asking about school sports, but I just sat silently, my heart full of suspicion. He led me inside, closed, and locked the door. The click of the lock made me feel trapped. Inside, everything was really very dark, and I quickly realized why. The house seemed to have no light, creating a mysterious and scary atmosphere. I swallowed hard and asked, "Where is Dennis?" My voice trembling even though I tried to stay calm. He started acting really fidgety and nervous, his eyes darting around, his hands clenched. The man looked at me with a smile, but that smile was no longer friendly. It carried an indescribable tension. My heart pounded, a feeling of danger surged. I knew I was in big trouble. The only light came from a dim lamp in the corner of the room, casting a weak light that made everything look distorted and scary. Then he disappeared into a nearby room. I heard a door open, followed by footsteps going down to the basement. He replied, "Oh, I think he's downstairs playing games. Wait for me a moment. Stay here." Another lie, but I didn't know it then. I stepped into the house, and immediately the reason for the darkness became clear. All the curtains were drawn, turning the place into a space like late night, even though it was still afternoon outside. I rushed to the front door, trying to open it quietly, but it was locked tight with a deadbolt. The escape route was blocked. I picked up the receiver and dialed 911, my hands trembling. The dispatcher confirmed the call, and I didn't say another word, afraid of being discovered. The only thing I could think of was finding a phone, so I ran into the kitchen and saw a wall-mounted one. Panic enveloped me. I still had a faint hope that Dennis would appear, but the regret of coming in here grew stronger and stronger. I hurried back to where he had left me, hearing his footsteps returning from the basement. I hid the receiver under a towel in the corner of the room, leaving 911 connected, hoping they would arrive quickly. When I didn't answer, he called again, his voice slightly louder. He called my name. "Come down, Dennis is down here," still maintaining the lie. I whispered to the dispatcher, "Please come to this house. I've been kidnapped." A direct plea for help, my voice almost choked. Then he walked fully up the stairs to find me, asking, "Are you okay?" Out of fear, I was forced to comply. I felt nauseous, scared, hating myself for getting into this situation, and I asked in a very frightened voice, "Can I go home?" Suddenly, his fake smile disappeared, his face changed completely. He realized I no longer believed him. We went down the stairs, and when I was only halfway down, the door behind me slammed shut, then locked tight. I was trapped. He approached with a seemingly kind appearance, but as he got closer, he grabbed my wrist, roughly pulling me towards the basement stairs. I screamed and sobbed, but he yelled back, "I'll let you go if you're quiet and behave." A threat meant to control me. I sat there listening to his heavy footsteps moving around upstairs, every sound echoing clearly. Light from a bare ceiling bulb shone down, casting a dingy yellow depressing light, making the place look like hell. In my head, I thought this is where kidnapped children are taken. Horror surged to its peak. I walked down the rest of the stairs, and the scene unfolded. The basement was empty, unfinished, with a cold, concrete floor, and only a single support column. I replied no, just to prevent him from going to the kitchen and discovering the missing phone. Then a new sound echoed, the doorbell rang 3 times. He walked around for a while, then came to the basement door, opened it, and called down, "Are you hungry?" Next came loud banging. I realized it was the police knocking on the door. He closed the door and locked it, leaving me alone with my heart pounding as if it were in my throat. The ringing and banging continued, making me extremely tense. Finally, a loud bang echoed. Perhaps the police were breaking down the door. I decided to wait until the front door opened to call for help, but I didn't hear his footsteps approaching. This was followed by hurried footsteps and shouting from multiple people, a sign of confrontation, hope for rescue. I screamed for help from the top of the basement stairs, my voice echoing in the cramped space, hoping someone would hear. A police officer grabbed my hand and quickly pulled me out, taking me to safety, where at least 3 police cars were parked, lights flashing in the rain. I had to recount the entire story to 2 police officers outside, my voice trembling as I described everything while waiting for my parents to pick me up. I learned that at school, things had already started. The police were called, and Dennis's dad realized something was wrong when he came to pick him up. I pounded hard on this basement door, each pound full of desperation, and then the door opened. Perhaps the police opened it from the outside. The man turned out to be a colleague of Dennis's dad, and he knew that Dennis's dad would be picking up kids on the last day. My parents arrived, my mother sobbing, holding me tightly, as if afraid of losing me forever, while my father tried to stay calm, but his eyes were red. The man from the house was brought out in handcuffs and put into a police car. That was the last time I saw him, a blurred figure in a terrifying memory. He took advantage of the opportunity to do what he did, a deliberate act from someone who was not well at all. I don't know how he knew my face, and now that I'm older, I try to avoid asking for more details, just wanting to forget that haunting experience. Moving on to another memory from my last year of middle school, the last day of the school year. Many students skipped school or left early, and so did we leaving school after lunch. My mother took me for counseling for many months, and my parents blamed Miss Blue for not properly verifying the person picking me up, a mistake they considered serious. My friend Eddie had a car and a driver's license, so he drove us there. That was about 17 years ago, and the fear still remains. Maybe he's out of prison, and that thought still haunts me. The weather was bad, stormy, dark, beach plans were canceled, so the group of close friends decided to do something else. We targeted an abandoned elementary school in town, which had been unused for about 10 years and was about to be demolished. The plan: break into the building to explore since there were no cameras, and the bad weather meant few people would notice. The most chilling thing for me is realizing if I hadn't called 911 before being pulled down to the basement, things could have ended much, much worse. A thought that wakes me up in the middle of the night. Now the whole group was inside through the window of a classroom. Eddie broke the window, cleared the shards, then waved us over, and we climbed through one by one. I told myself the school was about to be demolished anyway, so a broken window didn't matter. The doors were locked tight, not boarded up, so Eddie got a baseball bat from the trunk to break a window. The school was located in a residential area, not on a main road, and the back parking lot was hidden by bushes and the school wall ideal for discreet parking. I was worried, afraid the sound of breaking glass would be heard by the neighbors despite the rain, but we still giggled nervously at the daring act. The classroom still had a lot of furniture, like desks and chairs and some wall decorations, all covered in dust and damaged, creating an eerie, abandoned atmosphere. The feeling inside was really strange, as if we were stepping into another world where everything that was once lively was now just ruins, with the sound of thunder outside adding to the mystery and creepiness. I noticed the clear signs of decay everywhere, confirming that this place had been abandoned for a decade. We whispered, "Oh no," in fearful voices, knowing something was wrong. We started wandering through the hallways from room to room, exploring classrooms that were still full of desks and chairs, as if they were waiting for students who would never return. The whole group gathered in the same classroom, trying to stay calm amidst the decay and silence. But then a sound echoed from the end of the hallway, filtering into the room, making us jump. The classroom we entered looked like it was for 4th or 5th graders, based on the decorated walls with children's drawings and the dusty blackboard. A place once filled with laughter, now only coldness, darkness, and dust, waiting for the day it would be torn down. I called out to my friends. "Look, guys, use your flashlights," and all 4 of us shone our lights towards it, but the thing suddenly retreated back into the room as if hiding. None of the lights were on. Perhaps the power had been cut off a long time ago. So we used the flashlights on our phones to see, although a little weak light still filtered through the windows and doorways, making the place not completely pitch black. As we approached the corner of the hallway, I turned back to look behind me and saw something sticking out from the doorway of the classroom across the hall. A strange black shape which sent chills down my spine. We ran for our lives down another hallway, stopping when we thought we were safe now in the kindergarten area. The question flashed in my mind, who could be in here? But then another sound echoed from the distance, confirming that we were not alone in this locked and dark building. We fell silent, quickly turned off our flashlights, and after a flash of lightning, everyone thought it was probably just the wind or something insignificant, then continued walking. Our wet shoes squeaking on the floor, making it impossible to be stealthy. We were worried about getting caught for trespassing, but the greater fear was what was lurking out there. Slowly a shape appeared through the doorway, the shape of a head, which made our hearts stop. Sitting in silence, flashlights off, with only the sound of rain and thunder outside, then suddenly the room door clicked open as if someone was pushing it from the outside. The sound panicked us. We rushed into the first classroom we found and slammed the door shut. A kindergarten classroom with old toys and a small blackboard, now our temporary hiding place. The door creaked wide open, but at first we didn't see anyone in the doorway. The hallway outside was almost pitch black, and we tried to stay quiet to avoid being seen. Everyone saw it, and when lightning flashed, the brief light clearly showed it was someone's head looking directly at us, eyes glinting in the darkness, carrying death and unnaturalness. Eddie asked, "Do you work here?" But there was no answer, just terrifying silence. Eddie decided we had to get out immediately, handed me the baseball bat, and struggled to unlock the window, finally pulling it up enough for us to squeeze out. I started to stammer apologies, saying we would leave immediately, but the person didn't move, just stood there motionless and almost lifeless like a ghost. Eddie got out first, quickly disappearing through the window, followed by 2 other friends, and I was the last one, my heart pounding as I scrambled out, hoping not to be followed. I crawled out as fast as I could, afraid that at any moment that hand would grab my leg and pull me back into the darkness. The cold air outside and the pouring rain couldn't wash away the fear. I ran desperately to catch up with my friends who had already rushed to the car. I sat at the middle table on the left in the back corner next to a guy named Zach. I squeezed through to the window last, but before that I couldn't help but glance back one more time. The image of that head in the doorway still standing there, motionless like a watching ghost, sent shivers down my spine. Afterward, the building was demolished later that year, turned into a green park, but we were never caught or punished for trespassing. Moving on to another chapter in my life from my freshman year of college when I was struggling with chemistry, a difficult class with desks arranged in groups of 4. To this day, I still don't know who that person was. Maybe a worker or someone wandering. Their actions were extremely creepy, a memory that still haunts me whenever I think about that place. We jumped into the car, Eddie stepped on the gas and drove away quickly. No one dared to look back, leaving only the old building behind, as if it was swallowing all its secrets. Zach looked very awkward, like a Reddit moderator, standing 5 feet 8 inches tall, slightly overweight, and with an ugly, patchy beard. I didn't sense any flirting from Zach, perhaps because of his awkward personality, so everything stayed at a friendly level. Despite that, Zach was good at chemistry and academics in general, so when I had trouble, I asked for help, and he generously did my homework for me, even letting me copy during exams. On the last day of class, Zach did something completely unexpected. He asked me out on a date after class. Then Zach asked for my phone number to send me the homework, and I agreed, thinking he was just a little isolated and had no bad intentions. I replied vaguely, yeah, maybe then I can, hoping 2 weeks would be enough for him to forget. I wasn't physically or personality-wise attracted to him at all, so I politely declined, citing that I was preparing to go to Miami for 2 weeks. He nodded with a really awkward, cool expression, and the rest of the class passed in awkwardness. Zach didn't give up, immediately asking, "So, what about when you get back?" His voice full of hope, making me uncomfortable. I intended to reply later, but because of the alcohol, I completely forgot. After class, I went straight to my car and drove home. I was a commuter student. And it was Thursday, so that evening I went out with friends in town. I replied, "Sorry, I'm busy packing. I'm going to Miami today," still sticking to the lie. In the middle of having fun, I received a text from Zach. "When are you going to Miami?" A question that startled me. I told my friends about Zach when I was drunk, about the help and the date invitation. They laughed and joked that I should go to be nice, but I just joked back sarcastically. I continued to go out with my friends, my girls, that evening, trying to enjoy the night despite the lingering anxiety. I showed the message to my friends and they were also startled, their eyes wide with spreading concern. Zach responded immediately, "Okay." But in my heart, I knew I wasn't going anywhere and hoped he would never find out the truth. I replied to Zach, "What do you mean?" trying to stay calm, but my hands were trembling. Deciding not to reply anymore, I told myself I would never contact him again, hoping everything would end here. I asked loudly, "Who is it?" with a trembling voice. The next morning, I woke up to 2 more texts from Zach. First, a question mark. Then, "You're just going to ignore me because you don't need me anymore, aren't you?" An accusation full of insecurity and underlying anger. Amidst the music and laughter, my phone vibrated with a terrifying message from Zach. "I thought you said you were going to Miami tonight." A direct accusation that made me almost drop my drink, my heart pounding. Zach responded immediately, "Nothing, forget it. I just don't like liars." A cold tone full of underlying anger, making me feel like I was being watched. But late that night, just as I got home and took off my shoes, a knock on the door echoed, freezing me. Around 1 a.m., a time when no one should be visiting. I was truly scared, thinking I might be being stalked, so I looked around the bar but didn't see Zach anywhere. That only increased the confusion and the unanswered question. "So what the heck is going on?" Zach's voice from the other side of the door. "It's me." A confirmation that made me want to scream, realizing I was home alone. I quickly texted everyone, family, friends, about this terrifying situation, a feeling of horror spreading throughout my body. I yelled through the door, trying to intimidate him. "Get out of here right now or my dad will come out and hurt you," a fake threat, but it seemed to work as he didn't knock anymore and silence enveloped everything. The message started with Zach expressing a range of emotions, feeling used, lied to, and filled with hurt and anger. He put himself in the position of a victim as if I were the bad guy. Friends advised me to call the police, and I decided I would go to the station the next day, but before the new day arrived, another message from Zach came, a super long, weird, hateful, and scary message that shocked me when I read it. He mentioned our chemistry connection in class with an awkward pun, then complained about me making up the Miami trip to avoid a date. I told my dad about my fear, and he read the message, then sent Zach a long text and called him 10 times. The police said they would contact Zach, but he didn't answer his phone or reply to texts and then completely disappeared. The message ended with him saying he felt broken for wasting his effort, signing off "Yours truly, Zach," like a dark love letter. I sent that message to everyone, not caring about the time it was 3 a.m., then called my dad repeatedly until he answered. Zach didn't answer, too cowardly to face it, and the next day, I went to the police station with that message wanting to press charges. He demanded just one date, then said strange things about marriage, calling himself the ideal husband, which sent shivers down my spine. Zach believed he had risked his academic career to help me, and thought there was a little bit of interest in the way I looked at him. A distorted and delusional interpretation. I never heard from him again, and I think the police intervention and my dad's message scared the basement stalker away. A terrifying ending, but also a lesson about distorted relationships. My classroom was right next to the lobby, so I was curious about what was happening outside. Zach gave me the benefit of the doubt that I needed more time to think. Boasted that he had more to offer than other guys and offered to come back to my house to talk in person, an invitation repeating the stalking behavior with a warning that this was the only time. The hallway outside was dark, with emergency lights, a sight I had never seen, making me worried that the situation must be very serious. I quickly ran to the door, locked it securely, remembering the procedure. The door had a large glass panel with a curtain that pulled down. I was fortunate never to see Zach on campus again, and that experience taught me a profound lesson about dealing with a real stalker, a digital ghost that still haunts me in my dreams. I used the classroom phone to call the office, but after 4 rings, no one answered. That was worrying, but I told myself the office was surely safe. Moving on to another chapter in my life, when I was 26 years old, working as an 8th grade math teacher at a middle school, a young job, but I realized that age could affect how I handled things. I pulled the curtain down, turned off the classroom lights, and instructed the students to hide in the most secluded corner where they wouldn't be easily seen or heard from the door. During a lesson, everything was proceeding normally. In the math wing near the main lobby, I was writing an equation on the blackboard when suddenly the lockdown alarm sounded. Not a drill, but the real thing. Then suddenly a knock on the door echoed not a normal knock, but a frantic, panicked knocking, accompanied by "Please to be let in." I realized the voice was too deep, probably someone in their early 20s, not a student. I quietly approached the door, looked through the curtain, and saw the blurred figure of the person. I focused on keeping the students quiet, and finally the noise stopped, leaving a heavy silence. The person started knocking harder, rattling the doorknob, even thrashing at the door, still yelling, "Help me, let me in!" I wasn't fooled. It definitely wasn't a middle schooler's voice, so I ignored it and returned to the students, staying calm. The person said they could see me, knew I was listening, and kept pleading, "Please let me in a scared, trembling voice, as if trying to appeal to my sympathy. The person replied their name was Cody, claiming to be a student and needing to come in because they felt unsafe. But the voice was deliberately higher, as if pretending. The students looked at me with frightened and confused eyes, so I signaled them to be quiet, then asked through the door, "Who is it? What's your name?" We were in lockdown for half an hour. Then the announcement came over the loudspeaker. The police had checked the entire building, everything was safe. The threat was over, but the memory lingered. People weren't sure if the weapon was real or not, only that he was caught on camera leaving through the back door and the police caught him 2 hours later, but the weapon was gone. A terrifying mystery that made everyone think. When I entered the lobby, I saw a guy sitting at a desk staring at his phone. Afterward, teachers were provided with more details about the lockdown incident. The threat was a guy in his early 20s with shoulder-length hair, and he was wandering around the school with a small handgun. Moving on to another memory not long ago when I was still in college with a 1-hour gap between classes, and I needed to use the restroom. He looked up as I walked past, saying, "Good morning," in a pretty normal voice. I replayed my actions in my mind, wondering if I could have handled the situation better, such as not answering the door. But I justified that at the time I was too anxious and couldn't think logically. I replied politely, then continued down the curved hallway leading to the restroom. I felt a little weird, so I decided not to answer. The most terrifying thought is if I had opened the door for him, things could have ended in the worst possible way. A what if that still wakes me up in the middle of the night. I preferred using less used restrooms on campus, so I chose the restroom in the student activities building, which was usually empty in the early morning, and it was convenient because it was near my next class. I guessed and said, "Someone's in here." I was confused, wondering why he was in the women's restroom in such a situation. Through the small gap, I saw his face pressed against it, his eyes looking inside for a second. A terrifying intrusion that froze me. The door closed, but then I heard footsteps approach my stall and stop, followed by a light tap on the stall door like a finger tapping. While I was in a restroom stall, the room door suddenly opened and a male voice asked, "Is anyone in here?" A huge red flag because this was the women's restroom. I got out of the stall to confront him directly, realizing he was the person from the lobby. He asked why I didn't answer, then explained this building and the surrounding ones were about to go into lockdown because a student with a weapon had been spotted. I found the message alarming, so I let him barricade the door with a trash can. At that moment, I felt comfortable because I thought he was trustworthy. After barricading this door, we stood there awkwardly in the restroom. I tried to ask for more details about the armed person, but he said he didn't know anything more. A feeling of unease arose because of the way he looked at me constantly, as if he didn't recognize any social cues to stop. I thought he was the desk attendant, so I trusted him, and he showed me a message on his phone from an unknown number warning about the armed person on campus and instructing a lockdown. To create some distance, I took out my phone, thinking of checking if there was a similar message from the school. I asked his name and he replied his name was Eli, claiming to work in the building. Result: no message from the university. The first sign that this was a fake. I checked the school website for news or alerts, but there was nothing related to a lockdown or armed person, confirming that this was a lie. When I looked up, Eli had moved closer, the distance between us so close that time seemed to stop. I couldn't move, my mind was locked by the spreading fear. I started rethinking Eli's appearance. He was wearing light blue bootcut jeans, brown boots, and a gray hoodie, looking more like a maintenance worker than a front desk employee. Two friends replied quickly everything was normal, classes were proceeding as usual. Clear evidence that his warning was a fake. This mismatch made me suspicious. So instead of talking to him, I secretly texted my friends on campus asking if they had heard anything about an armed person or a lockdown. He looked towards this door and whispered, saying he heard something, then suggested we should hide in a restroom stall together, an idea that froze me, feeling like I was falling into a trap. I waited a few seconds, my heart pounding, then ran out of the restroom, dashed towards the nearest exit, not daring to look back. The scream panicked Eli. He spun around, looking quickly, moved the trash can away from the door and rushed out, disappearing from sight. I immediately called my mom, sobbing as I recounted the terrifying experience, and she immediately called campus police for me. My mom drove to school to be with me, and with her support, I told the police the details about the man. We texted each other, making plans to go to the beach, and Tyler planned to skip PE early to join us. We waited in the hallway near the gym, a secluded corner with little traffic, only students going to PE passing by. Eli started stepping towards me, his arm outstretched as if to push me into the stall. And in that moment, instinct kicked in. I screamed really loudly, the scream echoing in the cramped space of the restroom. My friends Ryan and Scott also had a free period, while Tyler only had it on some days, but today was Friday, and the weather was nice, so we decided to skip school. Moving on to another memory from my senior year 9th period. The end of the school day, and this period was a free period, making the school day shorter. The next day, the police called back, confirming they had reviewed the security footage. He wasn't a school employee, and they would try to find his identity, but I never received any further updates, leaving a terrifying mystery. Suddenly, the emergency exit door at the end of the hallway opened, a door not used for entry, and a guy walked in. Tyler texted that he would wait until roll call was over, then sneak out to the locker room to meet us, so we waited, but he took quite a while. He was wearing black sweatpants, a black hoodie with the hood up, and a black backpack, looking strange for a sunny day outside. We fell silent as he walked past, and he deliberately stared at the three of us, his eyes like knives full of threat and coldness. He stopped, turned towards Ryan, and asked, "You have a problem?" Ryan stepped forward, saying, "What, dude? Get away," his voice full of challenge. Scott and I stepped in, repeating "forget it" to de-escalate the situation, and finally he turned away, continuing to walk. A few minutes later, I texted Tyler telling him to hurry up because we had been waiting forever. Afterward, all three of us agreed that he looked extremely suspicious, possibly a student, but we didn't recognize him with a patchy beard and a mysterious appearance. He explained that the PE teacher had announced it and everyone was hiding in the locker room. Reality hit harder than ever, like a fierce wave sweeping everything away. Tyler replied that he couldn't sneak out because they were in lockdown, shocking news that froze us because we had no idea. This was followed by students screaming full of panic and chaos, a testament to the danger unfolding. Then I saw the man in black appear at the end of the hallway, running towards us at full speed like a rushing shadow about to swallow us whole. We realized the doors between the gym hallway and the locker room were now closed and locked, clear evidence of an emergency, and immediately we connected this to the suspicious guy in black. We dashed out the emergency exit he had entered, through running desperately towards the woods next to the school, hoping to find a place to hide. Stopping to catch our breath, we decided to lie flat on the ground, waiting, hoping not to be discovered. From a distance, we heard popping sounds echoing from a hallway. At first, I thought it was a teacher hitting something, but then realized it was gunshots. A terrifying sound that made my heart clench. We ran to the woods near the school fence, finding cover behind the dense shield of trees where we could be hidden from view. When he disappeared from sight, we agreed to keep running without hesitation. As I ran, I clearly felt the curtains of life slowly closing. Death seemed to be touching my every breath, turning everything into a living nightmare. Running back to the senior parking lot, I was surprised I didn't vomit even though my body was trembling from running in shock. Footsteps echoed nearby, getting louder and louder, and I saw him running through the woods searching for us frantically. But fortunately, he didn't notice and ran further away, leaving a tense silence. We jumped into the car and drove straight to my house, carrying all three of us, the beach plan completely canceled, replaced by overwhelming fear. I turned my head back twice, seeing him chasing us, although still quite far away, and heard him yelling threats, mostly unclear, but the words, "I'm going to kill you," echoed clearly like a deadly curse following close behind. Fortunately, the teacher survived, although initially everyone thought the situation might be worse. The incident quickly spread on social media and the school group chat, and I learned that a new teacher had been attacked and taken to the hospital. No one knew who the man was or why he targeted that specific teacher, a mystery that still haunts us today. I consider this a near-death experience and feel lucky that we survived, although the memory remains an indelible scar. We guessed he chased us because Ryan had challenged him, and perhaps he didn't act immediately because he didn't want to attract more attention, even though the lockdown had started. Moving on to another situation 2 years ago when I remember every moment vividly. I chose a restroom in the back of the school where hardly anyone ever went, thinking it was the perfect hiding spot no one could find me. So, I decided to skip class, choosing to hide in a restroom stall in the very back of the school where few people went. It turned out he had been reported by a nearby house for suspicious behavior on their property before coming to the school, and his strange clothing for the nice weather also made people suspicious from the start. I slipped into the last stall, sat there, and played games on my phone to kill time, feeling like a bad school day was about to end early. Near the end of the school day, everyone was heading to the last period. History, but I hated that class and teacher wasn't good at the subject and completely lacked motivation. The instructions were to follow procedure, go to the nearest room, lock the door, turn off the lights. I was startled but initially thought it was just a routine drill, so I stayed put in the stall. I quickly texted a friend to ask what was happening. My heart started to feel truly worried, realizing this wasn't a fake drill anymore. This was different. I told my friend I was in the restroom and they advised me to hide. Then the principal's voice came over the loudspeaker. Lockdown. Lockdown. This is an emergency warning. But suddenly, all the lights in the building went out. The buzzing of the lights and air conditioning stopped, completely turning the restroom into a pitch-black space. I texted to ask for the reason for this lockdown. I realized there was no safer place without having to run into the risky hallway, so I decided to stay in the stall, quickly dimming my phone screen to the lowest setting. I couldn't stand the silence, so I asked in a trembling voice, "Who's there?" His voice sounded about my age, so I decided to let it go to avoid trouble. We sat in silence for a long time, neither of us daring to move. Someone stepped into the stall next to mine, closed the door, and I had to hold my breath, trying not to make any sound. Then I heard hurried footsteps, followed by the restroom door opening. The threat was now right near me, leaving me utterly terrified. They replied immediately, "Where are you? This is a real lockdown. Everyone's asking about you." A confirmation that sent chills down my spine, realizing I was in a dangerous situation. After 5 long minutes, My friend finally replied. It seemed like a student with a knife was banging on classroom doors and demanding to be let in, news that made me shudder. My classroom and the restroom were on the same floor, so I turned off my phone completely and tried to listen to every sound around me, my heart pounding, my heart. I asked, "Are you coming out?" There was a tense second of silence, then a voice replied, "I'm just looking for a place to hide. I heard the lockdown announcement." An explanation that sounded plausible but didn't really answer my question. I got out of the stall, but was surprised to see the guy in the next stall still hadn't moved. Finally, the loudspeaker announced students should exit through the main doors in an orderly manner where police were waiting, the signal that the lockdown was over. He replied, "Yeah, just a minute," in a strange voice which made me feel like something was off, but I decided to leave first. As soon as I ran outside, I ran straight to a police officer, frantically recounting the experience in the restroom, describing the man in the next stall and what I suspected. The most terrifying sentence was, the police said the guy was still in the school and hiding in the back. I suddenly realized the person in the next stall was the attacker. After reading the message, my normal walking pace turned into a sprint. I dashed towards the main exit, not daring to look back, afraid that the nightmare was still close behind. Moving on to a new chapter in my life, I had my first real job working as a teacher at a public elementary school near my neighborhood. The police quickly checked the restroom, but when they returned, they reported that it was empty. The window in the restroom was broken, and they concluded that the guy had broken the window to escape, confirming he was the person we were looking for. One day, in the middle of handing out spelling assignments, the principal's voice came over the loudspeaker, an emergency lockdown order. As a new teacher, I wasn't sure if this was a drill or not, but I decided to follow the procedure to be safe. It was my first year teaching only September, and I was still learning, feeling pressured with a first grade class of about 20 kids. The chaos due to lack of experience made every day a challenge. As I was walking towards the main exit, my phone vibrated with a message from a friend. It turned out a student, a few years older, had tried to rob a nearby gas station with a knife, stabbing a few people, but failed and fled into the school to blend in with the crowd. I turned off the classroom lights, locked the door and windows, then told the little ones to sit against the wall out of sight, trying to keep my voice calm even though my heart was pounding. 5 minutes passed in heavy silence. Then I heard knocking on doors from a distance, gradually getting louder and closer. At first I wondered if the principal was checking, but fear began to rise. 30 minutes later, the all clear was given and we were allowed to leave. Then I heard the footsteps of one person approaching our classroom door, followed by a few seconds of silence, making the atmosphere suffocatingly tense. Then 2 gunshots rang out, not from the intruders, and I realized the police had arrived. Suddenly, a student cried loudly, the cry echoing and definitely audible from outside. It startled me, and immediately the knocking stopped as if someone was listening. In the following days at school, I received unwanted attention from friends and teachers, everyone asking about my story. But to this day, as far as I know, the guy has not been caught. A threat still looming, and realizing I had been hiding right next to the person I was trying to escape from, makes it difficult for me to cope, like a ghost always pursuing me in my mind. Immediately after, the intruders quickly ran down the hallway, their footsteps fading as if they were retreating. This was followed by the footsteps of multiple people running up, trying to bang on the classroom door, making the little ones start crying or screaming in fear. I didn't know what to do, feeling like I hadn't been trained enough for this situation. The silence was broken by a male voice yelling, "Hey, I think there are kids in here." That cold statement confirmed this was real, not a drill, and I felt the blood in my veins freeze. Afterward, the police stated that the shots they fired were warning shots aimed at the ground, intended to scare off the intruders without causing direct harm. I learned that the intruders were 3 local high school students, and they were caught later, but when asked for a reason, they said almost nothing. One said it was a dare, but I didn't believe it, because no dare is worth that much. Going back in time to a memory from the last day of middle school in late May, when the school held a field day to celebrate the end of the school year, I believe they had worse intentions. Something dark and inexplicable, but fortunately no one was physically harmed, although most were certainly mentally scarred. I couldn't participate because I had just had a concussion, and a feeling of disappointment enveloped me, as if I was excluded from the general fun. Instead, I brought my DS and decided to sit alone in the science classroom while everyone else was having fun in the gym. The teachers didn't seem to notice, as they were having a meeting in the room across the hall. I asked, "Are you looking for someone?" The feeling of being alone in that classroom was strange, hard to describe, like a weird void. And this was the first time I was completely alone in that space. Less than an hour into playing my game, my English teacher Miss Allen rushed to the classroom door and slammed it shut from the outside without saying a word. I thought she just wanted to block out the noise from the meeting, so I quickly forgot about it and went back to my game on the DS. 2 years have passed since that event, and I still continue to teach first grade at the same school in the same classroom. But every day I still see the bullet marks in the school hallway. Physical scars that remind me of the horror we experienced like an indelible ghost. He replied no in an almost angry tone which confused and alerted me. Before I could say anything else, he started walking towards me and I asked, "What are you doing?" I estimated he was at least in his 50s, and at first I thought he might be a student's father as parents sometimes visited. Just a few minutes later, the classroom door suddenly opened, and I thought it might be a teacher coming to check, but instead a strange man, whom I had never seen before, walked in and closed the door. He immediately let go and ran off down the hallway, escaping through the back door, disappearing from sight. I stood there stunned for a moment, then went back into the classroom, unsure how much time had passed. That story left a haunting impression on me as a reminder that danger can come from anywhere, even in seemingly peaceful moments. I told Miss Allen about the man and she immediately took me to see a police officer who was at the school. Finally, Miss Allen returned to the room explaining that she didn't want to scare me, but there was an intruder and the school was in lockdown and now everything was safe. I explained my experience in detail from when he walked in to when he ran away, and from that I learned that he was the reason for the lockdown. Before I could fully grasp the situation, he grabbed my wrist tightly and pulled me towards the door. But just then, the school's lockdown alarm sounded, echoing everywhere like a saving bell. It turned out he had been reported for watching the school all morning, and someone called the police when they saw him approaching the building, leading to the timely lockdown order. I played the double bass in the school's wind ensemble, and we were having morning practice in the music room. I am grateful every day that the alarm sounded just in time, saving me from the hands of the bad guy. A lucky moment that I still remember vividly as if fate intervened. Afterward, he was arrested, and he openly admitted that his intention was to scare children to get them into his car and kidnap them. A truth that still sends shivers down my spine to this day like a nightmare that never ends. He lifted his shirt, revealing something that looked like a handgun at his waistband, then said, "Hey kid, I need you to come with me, or I'll hurt you." A clear threat, but said in the most relaxed voice I had ever heard, as if it were normal, which brought forth pure fear in me because I had never seen that thing before. Moving on to another memory from when I was a junior in high school around April or May of 2019, in the Mississippi Gulf Coast area. I won't mention the school name to protect privacy. I wondered maybe he just opened it without thinking since the door locked automatically and often needed to be opened for students. As soon as the door opened, the person charged in forcefully, walking quickly to within about 15 to 20 feet of me. Midway through practice, about halfway through, I heard a knock on the outside door. An unexpected sound, and since I was sitting closer to the door than everyone else, I was probably the first to notice. He asked in a nervous but firm voice, "Can I help you?" The band director saw him first, immediately stopped conducting, and everyone turned to see what was happening. The director stated, "This is not where you check on students. You shouldn't be here." His appearance, a middle-aged Latino man about 5'6", wearing a gray hoodie and cargo shorts with both hands tucked into his hoodie as if holding something heavy. A suspicious posture that sent chills down my spine. He thanked him and quickly left the music room, walking into the school's main hallway. The ensemble was playing, so maybe no one else heard it. But before anyone could react, a drumline member, an acquaintance of mine, opened the door without looking through the window. A clear violation of safety rules not to open the door unless a student shows their ID. The man asked where he should go, and to my surprise, the director directed him to the main office through the main hallway, a decision that made me more anxious. Meanwhile, I had turned my double bass towards him and stood behind it as a potential shield, my self-preservation instinct kicking in without thinking. The director immediately called school security, and within a minute, a lockdown order was issued. The man replied in broken English, "Yes, I'm here to check on my daughter." An explanation that sounded plausible but still raised suspicion. After he disappeared, the entire ensemble was silent for a few minutes, as if trying to process what had just happened. A tense atmosphere hanging in the air. He turned off all the lights in the music room, and we crammed into the tuba storage closets, trying to hide in the cramped space, our hearts pounding with an unnamed fear. I told Miss Allen about the man, and she immediately took me to see the police officer who was present, where I recounted the entire incident from beginning to end. We never thought a real lockdown would happen until that day. Moving on to a memory from my childhood when I was a young child at a Catholic private school in 4th grade. The police explained that the man himself was the reason for the lockdown, as he had been reported for watching the school all morning and someone had called them when they saw him approaching the building leading to the timely lockdown order. I am deeply grateful every day that the alarm sounded at that exact moment, saving me from the hands of the bad guy, and it reminds me of the fragility of life, a lucky moment that I still consider a small miracle. Afterward, he was arrested, and he frankly admitted that his intention was to scare children to get them into his car and kidnap them, a truth that still terrifies me to this day like a persistent nightmare that haunts my sleep. The school frequently practiced lockdown drills every few weeks, and we kids treated it like a fun game, not really understanding the serious purpose behind it. One day over the loudspeaker, a voice announced, "We are in lockdown. This is not a drill," a statement that made some kids initially laugh, thinking it was so cool like a big game. We huddled together in the corner looking through the narrow windows, our hearts pounding with rising fear. Then loud banging on the door made everyone scream and cry like a storm trying to break into our hiding place. The silence was broken by loud shouting from the hallway, the voice of a lone man yelling unclear words as if anger was erupting. But our teacher, with a worried look on her face, quickly closed the door and turned off the lights, yelling at us to run to the corner of the room. Her actions made us realize this was serious, not a joke. The shouting got closer and closer, making the kids start to panic. And when it was right outside the classroom door, fear enveloped all of us.